Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Before we do some introduction, I just want to give a reminder to council and administration to address the chair after being called upon, so we can follow our proper procedures and protocols and lead by example to the youth council. I know sometimes it's easy to kind of relax it a little bit. And we will do an introduction of our youth councillors and our councillors, as this is our first meeting and introduction for the 2019-2020 Youth Council. So we'll start on my left. And if you just want to...
Are we going to move the gender introductions first?
We'll do the introductions first, if that's all right. And if you just want to speak loudly, because the microphones are positioned.
All right, well, I'm Andrew Vanderheg, and this is my first year on the Youth Council. I'm in grade 8, and I go to Pine Grove Middle School.
Thank you.
Councillor Jean Chenard, third year or third term as councillor.
Councillor Jackie Curry, first term.
Trevor Bevan, second term.
I'm Brayden Oishi, this is my second year.
Nicholas Hill, second year.
And
you
we'll
want me
skip,
to? Sorry.
Yes, our CEO, Mike.
Yes,
Durkin.
Mike Durkin, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer, fifth year.
I'm Danica Belisok, and it's my first year in Youth Council.
I'm Noah Ali, it's my first year on Youth Council.
I'm Hannah Espinosa, and this is my first year in Youth Council.
I'm Kieran Bradbury, this is my second year in Youth Council.
I'm Danielle Bittner, and it's my second year in Youth Council.
I'm Robert Previll, this is my first year on Youth Council.
I'm Leah Desotel, this is my second year on Youth Council.
Mayor Kevin Zahara, my first term as mayor, third term on council.
Councillor Troy Sorensen, second year councillor.
Councillor Janet Wilkinson, second term councillor.
I'm Maggie Wolfine, this is my second year on Youth Council.
Okay, and I forgot to introduce myself. Councillor Crystal Byer, first term, and current deputy mayor. So we will get an adoption of the agenda. If I can please get a motion that the agenda for the December 10th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted with the deletion of the closed session item J1 personnel. Councillor Bevan makes that motion. All in favor? Motion. We'll get everybody voting here.
Oh, we're all on
No. Motion carried. And can I get a motion that the minutes of the November 26, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Chenard makes that motion. All in favor? Motion carried. So we don't have any delegations tonight. We will move on to our reports from staff, executive office. We've got the strategic planning session projects matrix. And who's presenting? And our CEO Derek is presenting that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't have a lot to add. I hope this is at least somewhat familiar in the minds of council. This is an effort to try to do a better job of capturing and reporting on some of the discussions and items that come out of the strategic planning session in order to keep council apprised of their status. The intent with this report is that it would be reported quarterly to council for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
To administration through the chair. When you have council chamber rentals, when you're doing those, I would really like if some way you could make a sound system so that the people in the gallery can hear the people when they're reporting, because quite often their backs are to them and I don't think they hear properly there. And just while I'm at it, with developing an educational campaign on littering, could we really focus in on those wet ones or whatever that people are flushing, and to ask people not to flush them after seeing that wastewater treatment plant? This has really got me that they just can't be in their sewage system. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chenard.
Since we're talking about the renovations, there's a certain pipe that we should cut the cement underneath that chair. It's a minor thing, but it's an irritating, and I'm worried somebody could trip on it.
So if I may just add through the chair, so I think just keep in mind, council, that the presentation of this is not intended for each item to be commented on or reported on. Certainly, I think if council wanted a specific report on any item, they could request that, but I don't think we would be prepared, or the intent isn't to comment specifically on each item on the list.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, I just want to say thank you to admin. I really appreciate this. It really helps to kind of keep what we talked about at strategic plan that sometimes gets lost. And I think that this was
really nicely done for us, so thank you. Okay, Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair, I'd just like to echo those comments. One of my key concerns when I first started on council was worrying about when topics were going to get discussed and not knowing if I should raise them at the beginning or if I can wait till later. And this, not only does this kind of document progress, but also indicates when we're going to be dealing with certain subjects, so I can postpone my comments to a further date. So I think that is a great tool for us.
Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair and administration. I know this came up at our last meeting too, and I see it's on there again, voltage remuneration. You said third party. What is that going to cost us for third party to look at this, and is that not something we can do in-house?
CEO Durka?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm not sure, Councillor Bevan, I'll just answer this very generally as I just suggested. It's not really the intention to delve into the specifics of each of the projects. I would just simply say that the intent of using a third party is very clear, that it assists council in depoliticizing the discussion about remuneration when it's a independent third party who's doing the review and bringing information to council. The expense was, I would describe, minimal. I don't want to say specifically, I don't have those numbers right in front of me. And it was budgeted and expended in the 2019 budget, so we're not anticipating any additional financial expense there. Certainly, administration is very capable of doing that. It just becomes open to critique in terms of bias or those types of situations, and I think this council is well aware that of all the things that they do, dealing with their own consideration for their service is among the most difficult and the most political, and I think it is in the wisdom of council that a third party is involved.
Mayor Zahara?
Yes, through the chair to administration. Thank you very much for putting this together. This list is quite lengthy, and I'm just wondering if it would be better to have some priorities set, if that's something that you're going to refine this list moving forward. Obviously, there's certain things that have been on the list longer than others that are higher priority based on our discussions at strategic planning. And also a note to council as well that each one of these items will be coming back to council for further discussion, and that's where we'll have the opportunity to discuss those things and decide if we want to move forward or not.
CEO Durka?
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Zahara. I think those are the types of comments that we would welcome in terms of if priorities are shifting, or if council was to make a comment of, hey, we feel this project needs to be emphasized versus this one. Those are the types of things that would really help us, and that high level kind of juggling of the priorities, I think, is really where we'll get value out of that quarterly report. And you're right to identify that we can administratively only juggle so many balls at any given time. And so if we want to put one down to pick up another one, that's really the type of direction that we're hoping to get from council. And I would just add an additional comment. It wasn't just difficult for council to keep track of all these items, it was a challenge administratively as well. And this has already proved helpful in our work in terms of keeping focus on some of those things that council has directed us to focus on. And so we look forward to using this tool, and it's in its early stages. This is a new process for us, and so I believe that we will see refinements as well as we move forward and get better at using the tool.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
Looking through this list, and since we have youth council, I don't, like one of your council meetings, I would like this to go to youth council, and I would appreciate some feedback as well, because some of these ones I'm going through would affect you, so I appreciate the list, but if we could get youth council involved in some of these, I think would make it very interesting going through the list and get some feedback.
Okay, just to respond to that, Councillor Chenard, I'm sure we can add that to the agenda so they have an opportunity to view it in advance to the next meeting. Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair. I agree with the mayor here on this, that glad this has come forward to us. I'd like to see this come back as soon as possible into the new year here, because I do have other concerns that is on this year I'd like to express the opinion on. So I think the sooner the better, and some of these things will get done right away here.
CEO Durka?
Thank you. Yes, so certainly not the intent to bring this back more than quarterly. If you have, if a council member has questions of priority or, those general concerns and/or would like to request more information on a specific topic, I think that would be the purpose of this conversation, to get that discussed at the table, and then it would be at the discretion of council to invite administration to bring back a report on any particular item.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Just a thought, would it be, through the chair, sorry, just a thought, would it be useful to administration if council printed this off and ranked them 1 to 4 or something for priority?
Seo Dercott?
Certainly it wouldn't hurt. I think what administration would need council's ranking, and so that would be useful. I think if council was to use that as a tool to kind of identify their priorities and give feedback on where these fall in terms of the list. One of the efforts we try to make at strategic planning is to keep the list manageable enough that we can actively work on most or many of them at any given time. And so certainly it's our intention to address them as quickly as possible. We do a little work, obviously, administratively to prioritize that as well, but any and all feedback from council on prioritization would be welcome. I guess I would just conclude that by saying it would just need to be council as a whole providing that priority, rather than individual councillors giving that feedback.
Okay. Seo Dercott, would, if we ranked our top 2 in each department, is that something that you're looking for, so we're not overloading one department on the priorities?
Thank you. Again, we're certainly open to any, and certainly even at this stage, I think if there was a general conversation to go through this and say, hey, you're working on this and this, I see this as being higher priority than that, and then council as a whole, yes, we support that, administration could note that. We don't necessarily need to go through the entire list, but if there's a handful of items that council wants to make sure are prioritized, I think that would be appropriate. And I'm certainly open to anything, like a designation of an A and a B in each category, or a 1 to 4, or however. And at minimum, it would give administration some additional clarity on which priorities should be the focus.
Okay, Councillor
To the Chair to
Wilkinson.
administration, if indeed you'd like all of council's input, I would really like in the early new year to have some time allotted to us, either during a council meeting or some other time, so we as a council can discuss this all and get priorities going. Thank you.
Seo Dercott.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly that would be the purpose of the quarterly report, bringing that to council. In this case, if council was to ask for this to be brought back again, I don't have any issue with that. But that is the purpose of this conversation, as in council, administration would be perfectly happy to hear from council, tonight, that certain priorities have evolved or changed or need emphasis. So I would suggest that this is that opportunity for council to give that type of feedback. Yeah.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry that I misunderstood, because when I asked things, then it was that we weren't to discuss them now. So as a council, how do we come to that consensus as to what our things are, like this evening, to discuss it, for instance?
Yeah.
Seo Dercott.
Yeah, thank you. I think just hopefully to clarify that, it's not that we don't want council discussing the priority of the projects as they appear on the list or in council's consciousness. I think we just don't want to be diving into the specifics of any given item. That would be a separate report required for each of the items. But to say, council chamber renovations has gone down our priority and this one has gone up, I think that type of feedback is welcomed. I would also just again say, yeah, this is new and evolving, and this feedback is really, really helpful. We want to develop a tool that is meaningful for council and allows council to ensure that they're directing administrative resources to reflect your strategic vision. That's the purpose of this. And so again, open to how we might accomplish that, and just open to that feedback even beginning at this point in time.
Okay, Mayor Zahara.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and I think that I can just throw some ideas out there on what I think the top 2 priorities in each area will be. Just put them on the table. I'm going to just go under Community and Protective Services. For myself personally, I think that pedestrian crossing lights obviously is number one for me. And I think too, one of the things that we've talked about since I've been on council here is the neighborhood parks plan, so that would be number two, and a campground investment plan being number three for Community and Protective Services. Corporate services, if I look here, I think the non-residential mill rate research would be number one for me, and a focus on the town app would be number two. And under infrastructure and planning, let's see here. Best practices on snow removal would probably be number one. And asset management comparisons number two. And then stormwater maintenance number three. Tiny homes is up there for me as well, but I can only have three tops. So, and then for executive office, quite frankly, none of these are really a priority for me at this point, but council chamber renos probably would be one of them. We do have some deficiencies in here, and we've heard from the public that they can't hear us in the back, and the mic system in here isn't the best, so looking at what options there are for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to the administration, unfortunately I'm not prepared to rank them today, so I'd really like to go away and really think about this and provide my rankings in written format or email or something. I think I could do a better job that way.
That's what I meant, January, a discussion time.
Okay. Councillor Chenard?
No. Do you have a comment? You're just going around?
Just through the chair, that's why I was
Going around.
mentioning January as a discussion time. We could have time to look at this and come to some consensus for all of us so that we can,
Okay.
as a group.
Councillor Chenard, do you have something new to add?
I'm just gonna totally agree with the rest. Like, there is, like, now if we're gonna pick three, I would need more time because, and I believe sometime in January, we can bring it up at a later time or forewarn what the priorities, because I'm going through the list and I know some of them shouldn't even be on the list. So I would appreciate more time as well.
Okay, so then it sounds like we have a bit of an agreement that maybe we can bring it back to a committee meeting in January, and then council can be better prepared to address the rankings.
Certainly, and administration through chair administration is happy with that and happy to work with council. I think we want to be a little, if I may just provide a little bit of advice, I think we want to be a little bit cautious of trying to get too specific in our rankings, and it may be more of a high, medium, low priority rather than 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that would be a more effective model. And I wouldn't limit it to numbers per department. You just tell administration which are high priorities. I think as long as we keep in mind that they just can't all be high priorities, or it's not a ranking system at all. But just with some feedback, that would be my suggestion, and perhaps as we prepare for returning this report to council in January, we can make that suggestion that council would be prepared to provide that type of feedback on the document, if that's favorable to council.
Yes, I believe this has been a learning curve for administration and council as well on how we navigate determining our priorities of our strategic planning session. So thank you. Okay, so any further questions on this from council or youth councils? Nope. Okay, then we will move on to the report on the proposed amendments to the council remuneration policy. And I just want a reminder that we're focusing on the items discussed in the agenda package, and administration plans to bring a full briefing to be discussed in January on this topic as well. So, CEO Derricotte.
Thank you. Again, I don't have much to add other than the report. This is just to deal with two items that were recommended that they be addressed coming out of strategic planning. One of them was to adjust the way that we deal with council's promotional clothing attire, so when they represent the community that they have some branded materials. and it was suggested that we adopt a program where each councillor is just allotted an amount, and then they can select items that fit their sense of style as well as their physical preferences, because I think we can see not all councillors are created equal in that way, and so that flexibility in review, a few other communities have done this with quite success. To be clear, there is no budgetary consideration here. It is simply a shifting of this budgetary resource from general promotional efforts to this specific program. The second piece of this is just a piece of clarity that we discussed at strategic planning as well. If council is on a committee and there is remuneration through the committee, that remuneration should come directly to the municipality, as council members are compensated at a salary level in our community. So it's just to reflect those discussed changes.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Sorensen?
On that topic for board or committee, if you're looking at the wording here, it's a one long sentence, and the first portion of that sentence says that the per diem is paid to the town, and then the second part says per diem is paid by the board or committee. I believe you meant to say that in the second part, the per diem will be paid to the councillor.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Sorensen. I think I understand that the per diem may be paid by the board or committee directly to the councillor. We could add that piece for a little bit of additional clarity. I think that is the intention there. Yes, so we can make that adjustment before we bring it forward.
Okay, Councillor Chenard?
Am I allowed to comment on both of them?
Of course.
Okay, so the first one, I disagree with that, because there is some boards that pay, and sometimes you're added to a board, but that was factored in when we came up with the salaries. So in some of the cases, after you're on, it's no extra cost to the town. So if that council member is on the board and there is an extra per diem paid, it's paid for by that board. So it's not putting a factor on the town, and it's fair for everyone that's pointed. So I disagree with that one. I think we should leave it alone. When it comes to the clothing allowance, I would disagree with each council going out buying their own. We are to look as a team, looking around this room, you guys all have nice black coats on, it makes you look like the same team. So I would rather see that we concentrate on, when we're buying for council, you buy for 7 councillors. If there's shirts, jackets, I know through experience, because even at work, same thing. I got different people, but I can go out shopping and I can buy shirts and coats that are catered or tailored to fit each individual. So I would not be in favor of 500. I'd rather see us go out and purchase shirts, coats that match. And yes, if using our imagination, we can get ones that would fit everybody properly. Just my 25 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, I'm going to disagree with almost everything Councillor Chenard said. I don't agree. I think with the extra boards, we all sit on different boards. I sit on many boards that are full day meetings. I just took a day off work and was at a full day meeting. That board doesn't pay. So I do think that there is that difference of, I think that money that is in our salary, so that money going back in, or it would have to be that's consistent, that we are doing that, because I think that really puts okay, how come that was a full day and that board paid? So that idea of it going back in, because that's not consistent across and wouldn't be consistent. So if that board pays, I agree with what we're looking to change here by putting that back in. I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you on clothing at all. I think that is about, I think you can brand something, and lots of people do it. I've seen lots of different, that's one of the things the school division does all the time, is you can buy your own. You use the same branding, you use the same Edson, it puts it on it, but it allows it to be personalized to something that you are actually comfortable in and more likely to wear it. I think often what happens when you don't personalize that is people get it and then they just don't wear it because it's not comfortable for them. And so I think it's the same amount. The difference is that we're comfortable, and I think that we can all look cohesive if we've got that same Edson brand on whatever the clothing is.
Okay, CEO Derricott?
Yeah, thank you. If I may just add to that, this system certainly doesn't preclude council from communicating and saying, hey, we should all have a black outerwear piece that we can all look the same in. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but I don't think it precludes council from the kind of team look that I think Councillor Chenard has identified, and I think that is meaningful to develop that at times. I would just suggest that this policy still allows for the flexibility to address that concern. And if I may just add another piece of feedback on the board pay. This hasn't happened here in this community, but I am familiar with this happening in other communities where when there are boards that do pay, that there has been some tension among councillors in terms of who gets assigned to a certain board because there's additional compensation associated with it. And one of the intents of going to a salary model for our council was to avoid those types of conversations or discussions about choosing boards based on compensation or that type of thing, just for council's consideration.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, to administration, I really like the look here of youth council. You know, there is some unity in it. And I would particularly like to thank you for clarifying this about compensation for I was in a quandary really, like with Evergreen Foundation, because they do pay for the meetings, but it should go to the municipality, and it is, and thank you for that. It's nice to have it clearly written down, because we didn't before, and then you don't know, should you do this, should you do that, so thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Sorensen.
I believe we've discussed both of these topics before, strategic planning at least, and I'm in favor of both of these clauses.
CEO Derricott?
If you had a comment on the items.
No, just I echo Councillor Sorensen. We did discuss this, and I'm also in favor of the way they are worded, and with the addition of Councillor Sorensen's comment on the first one.
Yeah, thank you. And all I was going to suggest is, based on the conversation with some wording adjustments, it would be our intent to bring this forward for formal consideration at an upcoming council meeting.
Okay. All right. If you have enough information, then we will continue on. So our next report is from Community and Protective Services, the draft emergency management bylaw number 2241, and we've got Al Schramm doing that presentation.
I know Mr. Schramm doesn't fall into the age demographic, but he's young at heart, so I think he's in good company here with the Youth Council. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What we have presented to Council is a draft emergency management bylaw. It's to do an updating of our existing bylaw, which is dated back to about 10 years or plus now. With the new legislation that's come down from the province in 2018, the development of their new act and the new regulations that are coming out with this thought, this is an appropriate time to make sure that we update our emergency management bylaw to reflect those changes and the roles and responsibilities of everything. Council has a copy of the draft bylaw and the existing old bylaw, so at this time I'd entertain any questions that you have in regards to the new bylaw that we're proposing.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration. The term agency, was that decided by the MGA? They decided the term agency, because there's very specific agency law that gets tied to that word.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Sorensen. The terminology is directly out of the templates that we received from the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. Okay. The bylaw that we're using is basically their template that we've changed and modified and added. So the terminology is very consistent with what the Act is saying.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just add to that, it's not the MGA that references, it's the Emergency Management Act, but it does draw its terminology from that parent document.
Okay, Mayor Zahara?
Yes, through the chair, just for youth councillors, the MGA is the Municipal Government Act, and the Municipal Government Act is basically the Bible in which we operate. It's all the rules and regulations we need to follow as a municipality. So if you're wondering what MGA stands for, that's what it means. Through the chair, I do have some questions through to Mr. Schramm. Under 5, the Emergency Advisory Committee. 5.2, the committee shall consist of 2 council members and the Director of Emergency Management. Is this something that came from the province? 2 council members does not seem sufficient to me. There's usually on most committees that we have, there's more than 2 council members. And something like this, I think whoever's the mayor at the time should be a part of this, as they're going to be the main communication point for emergencies to the community. So that was one question. And 5.3 I think could be struck, because that's already covered within our council remuneration bylaw.
Okay, Mr. Schramm?
Yeah, to the chair, to Mayor Zahara. 5.2, we had tagged 2 council members. They recommended as a minimum 2 council members. Whatever council feel is appropriate to sit in this committee, we will entertain for sure. That's just the minimum requirement that the agency had recommended us to look at. And as for striking 5.3, that's not a problem.
Okay, CEO Derrick?
Thank you, and if I may just add to that, I think just to keep in mind that if council was to go beyond 3 members of council, my recommendation is that they would go to council as a whole. Once you have a council where you have a majority of council operating, it's just not good practice. So if they were to go beyond 3 members of council, in that case, my suggestion would be that council as a whole would just act in that capacity.
Mayor Zahara?
Yeah, I'm fine with council as a whole in something like this. I think it's beneficial that every person around this table in an emergency situation has a very good idea of what is going on and what is happening in terms of emergency management in the community. Nothing is worse than I think being on the outside looking in and not really having a good idea of why decisions are made or what's going on in an emergency management situation.
Okay. Councillor Swanson?
I would echo, through the chair, I would echo the mayor's comment there. As well as with 6.5, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, the committee is they create documents in preparation of emergency, so nothing the committee does is time sensitive. Like, they don't have to make decisions in a day or so. So I don't understand why the committee needs expenditure authority if they're not making decisions on the fly very quickly. So I kind of disagree with 6.5 unless I can be convinced otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Sorensen. In the bylaw, again, dealing with emergencies and the emergency management side, we want to make sure that it's reflective that should a disaster or emergency happen, that the bylaw does reflect the ability for council to make those expenditure decisions. It's really critical to have those abilities through this bylaw to do that on the emergency situation. When emergencies are happening, you're right, a lot of times they're slow acting. However, it's still very stressful, very strenuous, and very identified of the specific expenditures that are going to come down for that emergency.
So just to follow up,
yes,
I have no issue with the actual agency or when an emergency happens, then for sure whoever's in charge should be able to make expenditures. It's this preparation committee that's just creating documents in the background that there's no emergency for them. They can easily come to council and ask for any Tuesday and ask for some more money if needed.
If I may add to that, this point may be moot as well. If the committee is to become all of council, then all of council is existing, and so they do not need a special authority appointed there. And so if we are to consider moving in that direction, I would suggest that could be struck from the bylaw as well. Unless, Al, you feel differently.
Okay, Councillor Schnarden.
Just on item number 10, training and qualification. Member of council in town, Edson emergency management agencies must be trained and qualified. Can you clarify that? Like, members of council, we all have to be trained on this? Is there a training course coming up?
Okay.
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Chenard. The province is mandating training requirements for council and the DEM and other administrative roles. For council, the minimum training will be the elected officials course. That one is mandated through legislation now that all council must take this training. And then for the other positions, there's also some mandated minimum requirements of training as well.
So is that training going to be coming up for us then?
We will provide the training for all of our council in the new year.
Okay. Councillor Wolfing?
Could you give us an example of an emergency that would happen in Edson that we would have to prepare for?
Yep, through the chair to our youth
Mr.
council member. A good example, and one that's probably our biggest risk, is a wildfire. If there's a wildfire happening in the forest district, in the county, and moving into Edson, it's going to have an impact on us. That's a major emergency that our plan will kick in and really identify some of the key decisions that have to be made to deal with that.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair. Sorry, I was getting confused between what was the Emergency Management Advisory Committee versus the Emergency Agency. Because it doesn't make sense to me when I read, if those aren't the same thing, when I read Emergency Advisory Committee, 5.2 says the committee shall consist of 2 council members and a director of emergency management. And then 6.3 is a quorum of the committee shall at least 2 members and a council member. But when I'm reading this, I'm only seeing that there is those 3 members. So that's where I was getting confusion. And then that's where it says the town shall provide for the payment of expenses of the members of the committee. I think if that's council, then no. But if there's other committee members, then I think there is a difference between, are we paying those committee members their expenses? So I was just confused between those 2 things. So are they different things or the same?
Through the chair to Councillor Curry. If you think about it in the broadest terms, you have council here, you have your emergency committee here, and then your agency here. The agency is mostly developed from people who are operations. People, the agency is we're going to do the plans, we're going to do the planning, we're going to report to the committee, which in turn would report to council. And that's how the structure kind of lays out. And I know, again, it sounds like the wishes of this council is the committee is going to be all of council, which is fantastic. But it's still, on the official side of it, you still have to have it reporting up to the council level. Hopefully that clarifies.
Okay. Again, Councillor Curry?
I guess that does. If it's going to be just council, I think that makes sense to add that in. Because I think otherwise the Emergency Advisory Committee would be missing a section where who are the other people that make it up.
CEO Derricotte?
Thank you. I think I can add a few pieces of clarification from Councillor Curry's remarks. Some communities, in fact I would suggest many, are considering a committee which would include external people, members of the public and or members of other agencies, and so then if so, then the compensation comes into play. If at this point council intends to have it as council, again I think that's moot. The biggest distinction I would make between the committee and the agency is it's basically, if you think about it, like council and administration for emergency management. The committee is the governance, they set the policies, they set the guiding priorities, those types of things, and then the agency is the active piece, which where the boots are on the ground, and in particular if an emergency situation does happen, the agency they are the individuals who are actually responding and staffing an emergency response center and dealing with the emergency directly, and so it's almost similar to a council administration kind of distinction.
Okay. Councillor Vanderheeg?
Alright, in the case for 12.3, it has, in the case that the mayor and the deputy mayor are unable to act, the current acting mayor shall exercise the mayor's powers under this section. How do you decide who is this acting mayor?
Mayor Zahara?
Sure. So if something happens to me, council will decide to appoint an acting mayor. Yellowhead County currently has an acting mayor, for example. So that's how that is laid out. So that would be that person, whoever council had decided beforehand. The acting mayor would be the person that would be making those decisions.
Councillor Schnard?
Just to clarify, in an event, mayor and deputy mayor, so now I'm looking at it, if they're all gone to FCM and something happens, I think that's the way it's worded, that's the way I take it. So in an event, so his question is, how would you know who is the acting mayor? Because you're flown off to FCM or somewhere else.
I'm still the mayor, and I still have cell phone access.
Okay,
so,
but that just said how would we determine, but thank you for your answer.
I think I can add to that. The procedural bylaw also outlines the process by which an acting mayor would be designated. And in an emergency situation, in the absence of the mayor, or heaven forbid he was incapacitated for some reason, there is a process laid out by which a quorum of council, so 4 councillors getting together, then they could determine who would be the acting mayor, and then they would respond appropriately in the circumstances.
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair, along the same two, there's 2 specific clauses here on what happens if the mayor is not available, but there's nothing on what happens if the CAO is not available. So I don't know if you need to put that in there. It just seems very specific on what happens if the mayor is not available, and not very specific on what happens if you're not available.
Okay, so Derek.
I think you, so in general terms, it acts a lot like if the mayor's not available, the deputy mayor and or someone else is. Similarly, administrative responsibilities are delegated in my absence in a general sense. And again, if I was to be run over by a cement mixer or some other unfortunate event, there are mechanisms whereby the administrative authority is able to be applied. But it is definitely noted that we will ensure that process is in place. In this case, as a Chief Administrative Officer, I also hold the position of Director of Emergency Management. And in this case, that's, I think, the more meaningful designation. And there's also a Deputy Director of Emergency Management and a sliding list of individuals who would be called upon to fill those responsibilities in absentia of any other members.
Okay. Mayor Zahara and then Councillor Swanson.
Okay. If we look at 12.4, it's a little confusing to me because I don't think it's aligned very well with 12.1, because 12.1 says a state of local emergency may be declared by the mayor and the town manager when they are in agreement that a state of local emergency exists. And then at 12.4 it says when a state of local emergency is declared, council must identify the nature of the emergency in the area of the town in which it exists. But if you're going to be declaring a state of local emergency, you would really need it to identify the nature of the emergency. So how do those two things kind of work together? Unless you have to have council get together before a state of emergency has to be declared.
Okay, Mr. Schramm?
Yep, Chair to Mayor Zahara. The declaration is something that council has to do. You're right, the mayor then make the decision that there's a major emergency, we have to do it. So once you make that declaration, you can refine that declaration by saying it's very specific to a portion of the town. I think that's the intent of the bylaw. So if we do the overall statement that we need to have that declaration, so we have the abilities and the authorities to do what we need to do, but then it may be very specific to a portion of the community, which is going to be affected by that emergency, if that makes sense.
I think if I may add to that, one of the things that jurisdictions have experienced is often you're required or you want to make a response as immediately as possible, and declaring a state of local emergency is a critical component of allowing certain things to happen. And the requirement to get all of council together, or at least a quorum of council together, has been cumbersome in other jurisdictions when they've come up against something. It's the middle of the night, it's a long weekend, there's a challenge with that. And so I think the intent of that is to give flexibility for that process to be enacted as quickly and as easily as possible. But I do agree that 12.4 could use some clarification as to what that process may look like, and certainly I think administration would be happy to consider those clauses and try and clarify that a little finer.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen?
Yeah, I had comments through the chair. I had comments on the exact same clause. In the old wording, the person that declared the state was responsible to define its nature in the area and the communications. And I find it a little weird that, for instance, the mayor and you could declare a state, and then it's council's job to define the nature and area of it and then communicate it. What if council disagrees that there is ever a state of emergency? How can we define something that we agree that there isn't a state of emergency?
Okay, Councillor Vanderheg?
For 12.4, it says that the council must identify the nature of the emergency, but say the emergency advisory committee was only had 3 or so members. How would the entire council know how to identify the nature of the emergency?
Okay. Mr. Tran?
Through the chair to our youth council, very good question. Understanding the committee is designed to more focus on the planning aspects and the administration of the plans and all that. The advisory committee will not have a lot of working jurisdiction when the actual emergency happens. That'll be more of a role of council.
Yeah, if I may just add, I think we can all agree 12.4 needs some work.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mayor Zahara?
Sorry, I'm kind of nitpicking on this today. So 8.4 and 8.5, it lists a number of different advisors and people that would be involved in the emergency management agency. We have under finance and admin section chief, the liaison officer. What liaison officer? What are you referring to there? Are you talking about a school liaison officer? Are you talking about emergency management liaison officer?
Through the chair to the Mayor Zahara, in our plan, we have identified a municipal employee who is our liaison officer, specifically for the town of Edson, and that's who we're referring to on that. If I can share the name.
Yeah, I would just say that each of these positions has a designated municipal employee, and the titling is in reference to our municipal emergency plan, and it follows along with the ICS, the Incident Command System. And so each of these positions is identified in the Incident Command System and has a specific and associated responsibilities. So any of that terminology is connected to those processes. But I understand the question.
Madam Chair, if I can
yes,
continue.
Mayor Zahara.
And under 8.5, you have the school board chairman or designate. We have 2 school boards within the town of Edson. And just as a part of our what we try to do here is I would suggest that our school boards are chairwomen in both boards. So if we could have more general neutral language in that, that'd be great.
Okay. Anybody else? Does administration have enough information to move forward?
I think that was thank you so much. I think some very good feedback. At this stage, I think it would be most appropriate for some work to be done in this to come back to another committee before it was moved forward. So we'll proceed under that process unless we're directed otherwise.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Al.
So moving on, we don't have any informational items or sundry items. We've got questions from the media and public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting. Anybody else?
Madam.
Yeah, just please state your name.
Pardon me?
Oh, just please stand up and state your name so we can hear you.
Just a clarification on the clothing allowance that you're looking at for council. Do the rest of the employees of the town of Edson get a clothing allowance as well?
I would have to direct that to CO Dercott, please.
Thank you. Thank you through to the public member. No, there's not a specific allowance associated with each member. We do have each department or group has promotional allowances that they can consider those items where appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Madam Chair, maybe we want to open up to youth council if they have any questions.
Okay. Does our youth council have any questions regarding anything from the meeting? Okay.
Is youth council allowed to adjourn? Well, go ahead, if you have another one.
I'm gonna keep asking them.
That's what you're here for. If you have a question, ask
Yeah,
it.
if you have a question, feel free.
Feel free. Al?
Okay. All right, then
Most of them were answered.
we'll get, oh, sorry, Councillor Bittner.
What is the current budget like overall? How much has this council spent on promotional clothing items?
CO Dercott?
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have that number right off the top of my head. I would suggest that in my time here in Edson, again, this is from my memory, so I would have to confirm this, it certainly has not exceeded the allotted amount as per the policy. That would be more than enough to cover what has been allocated in any given year.
Okay. Anybody else? No. All right, then I need a motion that the meeting be adjourned. Councillor Chenard, all in favor?
And he helped me, he's my deputy council.
Okay, motion carried.
I was gonna ask